Hello, everybody. This is Wolf of Dimensions coming back with another episode of the Week of Terror. And in this one, we have a very special 80s film by John Carpenter. I've done quite a few John Carpenter films already with The Thing. I actually plan to do a lot more. He is, at the moment, one of my favorite directors. And this film is also very special to me. I watched it a bit older in my time than The Thing. And my overall opinion on this movie is it was a good satire. It was a good look at the consumerism of the 80s and all that. It was heavily focused on how potentially our society could be dragged down by another race of beings destined to take over our planet. It was a big dig at elitism and consumerism. And that's pretty impressive for the time, especially since it's almost as equally a cheesy horror film from a short story that's only a few pages long. Which I've even read the short story. I've done a reading of it. And it's actually a really entertaining short story as well. I think the characters are amazing. I think Carpenter does a lot with a little. Like, he is given very little and does a lot with it. And he just knows how to make a classic, fun film, almost like a 30s, 40s horror film in the 80s. He just translates it so well. And this is a great example of that. From the effects and the sets and the characters, it's all stunning. So They Live, as I mentioned before, is a dig at the heavy consumerism and elitism that were rampant in the 80s and they're still taking place today, even if it's just not as loud and vibrant. That being said, it's also a look at the potential of alien creatures taking over Earth. How they do it. You know, in most situations, people think of Independence Day or other films where just aliens invade Earth or they slowly steal people or experiment on them. This is more like another horror film of this time, or of the 60s, actually. That film being in question, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And the concept for these films, these two films specifically, was the idea of being ever slowly replaced or infested, where your neighbor, your boss, who you're working with, they could potentially be an intruder from the stars bent on taking over life as we know it. It's a big fear that came out right after World War II when dealing with the Red Scare, with communism, and also the Roswell incidents where aliens were first discovered. Here, though, it's already happened. We didn't see it progress. We're entrenched in the center of it. And it's up to one man, a man who is never named in the film, and he still is an amazing character, George Nada, played by Roddy Piper. You know, I've never thought much about wrestlers acting, but he is just so enjoyable to watch. And every moment's just a joy. And it's up to him to stop it once he finds out what's happening. So I'm not going too deep into it with the story summary because I really want people to watch this. It's an underrated classic, and I hope more people get into it. Now, the next part, as from before, is story quality. Unlike Dracula, where the story was kind of ripped and torn in different pieces from the book, and heavy 30s mantras and film social cues were shoved in, this took upon a short story and made an entire, like an even greater story. Like, it made an actual world around a 7-page story. It builds each character vibrantly, and the world that it's set in is not too crazy. Like, the creatures that are involved aren't too heavy sci-fi that it's almost unbelievable. Carpenter, as I said in the beginning, is an amazing director. Usually, if you give him a story, it's not going to be a heavy failure. Even if people at the time of release didn't like the film, all of his hits become cult classics, just in the same way as some of the films he loved growing up. This piece especially is just entertaining. Like, the story is so unique and at the same time so familiar that it becomes fresh in a very new and different way. I can't say I've seen anything exactly like this film growing up, and I can't say that in my dive into older filmography I've seen anything like it since. There are bits and pieces you can take, but this feels like an interesting amalgamation of 80s style and multiple 40s and 50s sci-fi alien influence. It's unique, and it's just overall an amazing story. The story of humanity through one man standing up and fighting for their right to exist on their own planet. It hits you with the idea that one man can make that change. And that's important. That's important for people. That's important for society. So overall, I've got, with story quality on this one, I've got to give it a really top tier level, and it will influence my rating. Next, we have the fun factor. Now, if you've heard me gush over this movie in the last few minutes, I really think this is an enjoyable movie. And Roddy Piper, being a wrestler, he has all these one-liners and stuff. They're not Arnold Schwarzenegger level, and no one can compete with Arnold in that degree. But any of his one-liners or anything he says is just entertaining to watch. It's like one of the aliens sees him, and he has a shotgun, and they're reporting on him, and he's like, "Mama don't like tattletales." And he just aims. It's just goofy. It's just cheesy fun. And I think that's the thing about this, is that it can tell a serious story while being so cheesy that it just all loops around into being this enjoyable experience. It is a warm, fun experience of action fluff and sci-fi fluff. I don't think, when it comes to alien films, you will ever watch something that you can just turn your brain off to, but still ingest a full, enjoyable piece of media. Like, there are films that you watch. Like, for example, if someone wants to watch a serious film, a strong piece that's supposed to really hit you, something like, for example, Requiem of a Dream. Or if you want to watch something and turn your brain off, you just want to watch mind-numbing action and get thrills, and you watch something like what's been recently released, Bullet Train. I highly recommend. But this is a good mixture between both. You can turn your brain off and enjoy the visuals and the effects and the action, but the story snakes its way into your brain even while you're not thinking about it. It'll leave you thinking about all of it after the film is over. You start thinking about all the cues and important points. And that's just a really fascinating and enjoyable thing for me. So, top level of fun factor. Moving on to rating. I'm going to have to give this 4 to 4.5 stars. I think this is almost as good as it gets, especially for the alien genre, and I am not one heavily on the alien genre train. This is just top tier if you want to watch that. If you're not a fan of the alien genre, but you love some John Carpenter, you love some 80s action, some cheese, and some fun, still give it a chance. John Carpenter will give you exactly what you need. That I promise.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum. And I'm all out of bubblegum.